Lisa Carter sat at her desk and stared at the numbers on her screen. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She had been working as Earth's main ambassador to the Galactic Council for 5 years now, and she had never seen anything like this before. Every single vote was the same. Yes, 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 all down the line. She called out to her assistant in the next room. Jake, can you come in here for a minute? Jake Morrison walked into her office. He was a good man, smart and careful with details. Lisa trusted him more than anyone else on the station. Look at this, Lisa said, pointing at her screen. Tell me what you see. Jake leaned over and studied the voting records. His face went from curious to confused to worried in just a few seconds. This can't be right, he said. Every species voted yes on our mining request, even the Zephyrians. That's not the weird part, Lisa said. She pulled up more files. Look at this one from last month. We asked for military escort rights through the neutral zone. Every single species voted yes. Jake sat down in the chair across from her desk. And the month before that? Emergency colony rights in the outer rim. Unanimous, yes, vote. Lisa rubbed her temples. She was getting a headache. Jake, I've been looking at 20 years of records. Every time we ask for a diplomatic exception, every species votes yes. Not most of them, not even almost all of them. Every single one. Jake was quiet for a long moment. He was thinking, and Lisa could see the worry growing on his face. That's impossible, he said finally. The Zephyrians hate our expansion policies. They've said so in public meetings. The Crystalline Collective thinks we're too messy and chaotic. The Vorthon Empire calls us primitive babies who just learned to walk between the stars. I know, Lisa said. That's what makes this so strange. She stood up and walked to the big window that looked out into space. Diplomatic Station Omega was huge, almost like a small city. Ships from dozens of different species came and went every day. She could see a Zephyrian transport docking at Pier 7. Its long, elegant shape was so different from the boxy human ships. Pull up the Kepler Nebula vote, she said without turning around. Jake typed on his tablet. Here it is. We asked for exclusive mining rights in Sector 12 through 18. The vote was, he paused, unanimous yes, even though 3 different species had already filed claims for the same area. They gave up millions of credits in mining rights just to vote yes for us, Lisa said. Why would they do that? Jake scrolled through more records. The medical supply run to Vega Prime. We asked for military escort through 3 different species territory. All yes votes, even though it meant their own ships had to change course and wait. Lisa turned back to face him. And the refugee settlement on New Haven? Unanimous yes, even though it was in the neutral zone and technically illegal under galactic law. Jake set down his tablet. Lisa, this doesn't make any sense. These species disagree with us on almost everything. They think we're too aggressive, too emotional, too unpredictable. But they keep voting yes when we ask for exceptions. Lisa sat back down at her desk. She pulled up a file that had been bothering her for weeks. Look at this one, she said. 3 months ago, we asked for permission to send armed ships into Andromedan space. That should have been an automatic no vote. The Andromedans are neutral and they don't allow any military ships in their territory. Ever. But they voted yes, Jake said, reading over her shoulder. Not just yes, unanimous yes. Even the Andromedans voted to let our warships into their own space. Lisa shook her head. That's not just strange, Jake, that's impossible. Jake was quiet again. He did this when he was thinking hard about something. Lisa had learned to wait for him during these moments. He always came up with good insights. What if, he said slowly, what if they know something we don't? What do you mean? Well, think about it. We ask for these exceptions, and we always have good reasons. The Kepler Nebula mining rights were because we detected some kind of distress signal in that area. The military escort to Vega Prime was to deliver medical supplies for a plague outbreak. The refugee settlement was because those people had nowhere else to go. Lisa nodded. That's true. We never ask for exceptions just because we want something for ourselves. Right. So maybe the other species have figured that out. Maybe they vote yes because they know that when humans ask for exceptions, it's usually for a good reason. But that still doesn't explain why species that hate us would vote yes, Lisa said. The Zephyrians have opposed almost every human proposal for the last 10 years. Why would they suddenly start helping us? Jake shrugged. I don't know, but there has to be a reason. Things like this don't happen by accident in galactic politics. Lisa looked at her screen again. 20 years of yes votes, hundreds of diplomatic exceptions all approved unanimously. It was like the entire galaxy had decided to trust humanity with anything they asked for. But why? She thought about the species she dealt with every day, the proud Zephyrians with their long history and elegant culture, the logical crystalline collective that made every decision based on mathematical calculations, the ancient Vorthan Empire that had been exploring space when humans were still living in caves. These were not species that made emotional decisions. They didn't vote yes just to be nice. Every choice they made was carefully planned and based on their own interests. So why did they keep saying yes to humanity? Jake, she said, I want you to dig deeper into these records. Not just the votes, but the discussions before the votes, the private meetings, the side conversations, anything you can find. Looking for what? I don't know yet, but there's a pattern here, and I want to understand it. Lisa stood up again and walked back to the window. Something happened, Jake, something that made every species in the galaxy decide to trust us. I want to know what it was. Jake nodded and headed for the door, but he stopped before leaving. Lisa, what if the reason is something we don't want to know? She turned to look at him. What do you mean? Well, what if they're not voting yes because they trust us? What if they're voting yes because they're afraid of us? Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She had never thought of that possibility. Find out, she said quietly. Whatever the reason is, I need to know. 25 years earlier, Captain Bill Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Titan and listened to a sound that made his blood run cold. It was a distress signal, weak and broken, coming from somewhere in the asteroid field ahead of them. The Titan was not a warship or a rescue vessel. She was a mining ship, old and slow, with a crew of 30 humans who were just trying to make a living pulling rare metals out of dead rocks. They had been working in asteroid field ZX-7 for 3 months, and they were supposed to head home next week. Captain, said his communications officer, Amy Brooks, I'm getting a clearer signal now. It's definitely a distress call. Bill walked over to her station. Can you tell what kind of ship? Amy adjusted her equipment and listened carefully. It sounds like Vorthon, sir. Their language anyway. And Captain, they're in serious trouble. Bill's chief engineer, Maria Santos, looked up from her console. Captain, I'm reading some very strange energy signatures about 2 kilometers from here. It looks like some kind of gravitational anomaly. What kind of anomaly? Maria's face was pale. If I'm reading this right, it looks like an artificial microsingularity. Something very small but incredibly dense. It's pulling everything around it into a tight spiral. Bill felt his stomach drop. Microsingularities were experimental technology, far beyond what most species could safely handle. If someone had been experimenting with one and lost control, the results would be catastrophic. Amy, can you reach the ship that's sending the distress signal? I'm trying, sir. The gravitational field is interfering with communications. She worked at her controls for several minutes. Finally, she looked up with relief. I've got them, Captain. It's a Vorthan research ship called the Deep Thought. They say they were conducting experiments on artificial gravity when something went wrong. How many people on board? 43, sir, including younglings. Bill closed his eyes. Vorthon younglings were like human children, helpless and innocent. The thought of them trapped in a failing ship made him feel sick. What's their situation? Amy listened to the weak signal. Their ship is caught in the gravitational pull of the microsingularity. They can't break free, and their hull is starting to crack under the stress. They estimate they have maybe 6 hours before the ship breaks apart completely. Maria was studying her instruments. Captain, I'm running calculations on the gravitational field. Any ship that gets too close will be pulled in just like they were. We don't have the power to break free once we're caught. What about a rescue attempt? Sir, with all respect, it would be suicide. The Titan is a mining ship. We don't have the engines or the shielding to survive those forces. Bill stared out at the asteroid field. Somewhere out there, 43 people were waiting to die. Men, women, and children who had done nothing wrong except try to push the boundaries of science a little too far. Have you contacted the Vorthan military? He asked Amy. Yes, sir, they have ships en route, but the closest ones won't arrive for at least 6 hours, maybe longer. And the research ship won't last that long. No, sir. According to their engineer, the hull will collapse in 4 hours, maybe 5 if they're lucky. Bill walked to the front of the bridge and looked out at the stars. He had been a ship captain for 15 years. He had made a lot of hard decisions in that time, but never one. Like this, behind him he could hear his crew talking quietly among themselves. They all knew what he was thinking. They also knew it was impossible. Captain, said his navigator, Dan Cooper. I've been looking at the gravitational readings. There might be a way. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at Dan. He was young, maybe 25, but he was the smartest person Bill had ever met when it came to space navigation. Tell me, Bill said. Well, it's crazy, and it probably won't work. But if we overload our fusion drive and use our mining charges to create a controlled explosion at exactly the right moment, we might be able to create enough thrust to pull both ships clear of the gravitational field. Maria shook her head. Dan, the forces involved would tear both ships apart. The Titan wasn't built for that kind of stress. I know, but it's the only chance they have. Bill looked around at his crew. These were good people. Hard-working miners who had signed up to dig metal out of rocks, not to risk their lives on impossible rescue missions. What are the odds? He asked Dan. Dan was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, Captain, maybe 1 in 10 that it works, maybe less. And if it doesn't work, we all die, Maria said bluntly. The explosion will either destroy us outright or leave us drifting in space with no power and no way to call for help. Bill nodded. He had expected that answer. Captain, Amy said softly, I'm still in contact with the research ship. They know we're here. They're asking if we can help them. What did you tell them? I told them we were evaluating the situation. Bill walked back to his captain's chair and sat down. 43 lives, 43 people who would die if he made the safe choice and waited for the Vorthan military to arrive. He thought about his own crew. 30 good people who trusted him to make smart decisions and bring them home safely. If he ordered this rescue attempt, he would probably be sending them all to their deaths. But if he didn't try, he would be condemning 43 innocent people to die while he sat safely 2 kilometers away. All hands, he said into the ship's communication system. This is the captain. Report to stations and prepare for emergency maneuvering. We're going to attempt a rescue. Maria stared at him. Captain, are you sure about this? Bill looked at her and smiled sadly. No, Maria, I'm not sure at all, but those people need help and we're the only ones here who can try to give it to them. He turned to Dan. Set course for the research ship and send word to Earth. If this goes wrong, I want them to know what happened and why we tried. The rescue attempt began badly and got worse from there. Captain Bill Hayes watched his crew work with desperate efficiency as the Titan moved slowly toward the trapped Vorthan ship. Every meter they traveled brought them closer to the point where the gravitational forces would catch them too. Hull stress is climbing, Maria Santos called out from her engineering station. We're not even close yet and the ship is already groaning. Dan Cooper was at the navigation controls, his hands flying over the instruments. Captain, I need to adjust our approach angle. The gravitational field is stronger than I calculated. Through the front window, they could see the Vorthan research ship, Deep thought. It was caught in a slow spin, tumbling end over end as the micro-singularity pulled it closer and closer. Parts of its hull were already buckling under the stress. Amy, can you still reach them? Bill asked. Barely, sir. They say their hull integrity is down to 30%. They don't think they can last another 2 hours. Bill nodded grimly. The Vorthan military ships were still 4 hours away. Dan, how close do we need to get? Within 500 meters, Captain. That's the maximum range for our grappling system. And what happens when we fire the grappling hooks? We become connected to their ship. After that, we either pull them out or we all go down together. Maria looked up from her console. Captain, I need to tell you something. I've been running calculations on our fusion drive. To generate enough power for this rescue, we'll have to overload it by at least 300%. What does that mean? It means there's a good chance the drive will explode. Even if it doesn't explode, it will probably burn out completely. We might not have enough power left to get home. Bill was quiet for a moment. He looked around at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for his decision. Does anyone want to change their mind? He asked. This is the last chance to turn back. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They all just looked at him with calm, determined faces. All right then, Bill said. Let's do this. The next hour was the longest of Bill's life. The Titan crept closer and closer to the deep thought, while the gravitational forces grew stronger and stronger. The hull creaked and groaned like a living thing in pain. 500 meters, Dan announced. Fire grappling hooks, Bill ordered. 2 massive cables shot out from the Titan and attached to the Vorthon ship. Immediately, both vessels jerked as they became connected. Connection secure, reported Pete Wilson, the grappling operator. But Captain, the cables are under enormous stress. I don't know how long they'll hold. Maria, start the overload sequence. Maria's hands hesitated over her controls. Captain, once I start this, there's no going back. The fusion drive will either give us enough power to break free, or it will kill us all. I understand. Do it. Maria began the sequence. Throughout the ship, lights dimmed as power was redirected to the engines. The Titan began to shake as the fusion drive built up to dangerous levels. Power at 200%, Maria called out. Hull temperature rising. The gravitational pull fought against them like a living enemy. Both ships were caught in a deadly dance, spinning slowly around the invisible point where the micro-singularity waited to destroy them. Power at 250%. Captain, we're getting dangerous readings from the engine core. Keep going. Power at 300%. Sir, this is it. Any higher and the drive will definitely explode. All hands prepare for full thrust, Bill announced over the ship's communication system. He looked out at the deep thought. Through its windows, he could see Vorthon faces pressed against the glass, watching their rescue attempt with desperate hope. Fire all mining charges, Bill ordered. The explosion lit up space around them like a small sun. The combined force of the overloaded fusion drive and the mining charges created a thrust so powerful that both ships lurched forward like toys in the hands of a giant. For a terrifying moment, Bill thought they had failed. The gravitational pull seemed to stretch them backward, fighting against their escape. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as systems overloaded and failed. Then, suddenly, they were free. Both ships shot forward, carried by the momentum of their desperate escape. Behind them, the micro-singularity collapsed in on itself and disappeared, taking several asteroids with it. We did it, Dan whispered. We actually did it. But their celebration was short-lived. Maria's voice was grim as she reported from engineering. Captain, the fusion drive is completely burned out. We have maybe 6 hours of emergency power left, and the hull has multiple fractures. We need help, and we need it fast. Bill nodded. Amy, send out a distress call. Tell them we have 2 ships in need of immediate assistance. Already done, sir. I'm getting responses from several different species. The Zephyrian Admiral Vexcar says his fleet will reach us in 2 hours. Bill sat back in his captain's chair and allowed himself a small smile. They had done the impossible. 43 Vorthon lives had been saved, and somehow his own crew had survived as well. 2 hours later, when the Zephyrian rescue ships arrived, Admiral Vexcar came aboard the Titan personally. He found Bill Hayes in the medical bay, being treated for radiation poisoning from the overloaded fusion drive. Captain Hayes, the Admiral said, I have been in space for 40 years. I have seen many brave acts and many foolish ones. What you did today was both. Bill looked up at the tall, elegant Zephyrian. We couldn't just let them die, Admiral. Why not? They were not your people. This was not your responsibility. You risked 30 lives to save 43 strangers. Bill was quiet for a moment. The radiation treatment was making him tired, but he wanted to answer the Admiral's question properly. Because they needed help, he said finally. And we were there. Admiral Vexcar stared at him for a long time. Then he did something no human had ever seen a Zephyrian do. He bowed. Captain Hayes, he said, today you have taught me something about courage that my people had forgotten. 5 years after the Titan incident, Dr. Lysander Knox stood before the largest gathering of alien leaders in galactic history. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was packed with representatives from every known species. They had all come to hear what the human scientist had discovered about his own people. Knox was nervous. He had spent months preparing for this presentation, but he still wasn't sure how the aliens would react to what he had to say. Honored delegates, he began. You have asked me to explain human behavior in the context of the Titan rescue. After extensive study, I believe I have found the answer. But I must warn you, what I am about to share may be disturbing to some of you. The hall was completely silent. Knox could see hundreds of different alien faces staring at him, waiting for his explanation. Every species in this galaxy, Knox continued, makes decisions based on 3 basic principles. First, logical self-interest. Second, survival instincts. Third, cultural programming. These are the foundations of all intelligent behavior throughout the known universe. He paused and looked around the room. Humans are different. We regularly ignore all 3 of these principles when we encounter others in need. We will choose certain death to help complete strangers. We will sacrifice our own interest to protect beings we have never met. We will go against every survival instinct we have if we believe it is the right thing to do. A murmur ran through the crowd. Knox could see confused faces and worried expressions. Let me give you some examples from human history, Knox said. During our wars, human soldiers will charge into enemy fire to rescue wounded comrades, even when they know it means their own death. During natural disasters, humans will enter burning buildings to save pets that belong to other people. During our space exploration, humans have sacrificed themselves so that others might learn from their deaths and avoid the same mistakes. The Crystalline Collective's representative, a being called Harmonic 7, raised a crystalline appendage to speak. Dr. Knox, are you saying that humans are incapable of logical thought? Not at all, Knox replied. Humans are quite capable of logic, but when faced with moral choices, we often choose to ignore logic in favor of what we consider to be right. Admiral Vexcar, who had been present at the Titan rescue, stood up. Dr. Knox, I have studied the records of that incident many times. Captain Hayes had no logical reason to attempt that rescue. His crew had families waiting for them at home. His ship was valuable. The odds of success were impossibly low, yet he chose to try anyway. Exactly, Knox said. And that choice reveals something fundamental about human nature. We have a concept that we call moral imperative. When we see someone in need, we feel compelled to help, regardless of the cost to ourselves. An ancient Vorthon philosopher named Morthak spoke from his place in the gallery. His voice was weak with age, but his words carried across the silent hall. I have lived for 300 years, Morthak said. I have seen many species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations grow and change. But I have never seen anything like what those humans did. They chose to die for strangers. Not for glory. Not for reward. Not for their own people. They chose to die for beings they had never met simply because those beings needed help. Knox nodded. That is the key difference between humans and every other species we have encountered. You see calculated risk where we see moral duty. You see acceptable losses where we see individuals worth saving. The hall erupted in discussion. Aliens spoke rapidly to each other in dozens of different languages. Knox waited for the noise to die down. There is something else, Knox said, and the hall fell silent again. We have discovered that this human trait is not learned behavior. It is not cultural programming. Human children, as young as 2 years old, will try to help others who are in distress even when helping means giving up something they want for themselves. A Zephyrian delegate called out, "Are you saying this behavior is genetic?" "We believe so," Knox replied. "Humans appear to be born with an instinct to help others, even at personal cost. This instinct is so strong that it can override our survival programming." The implications of this statement created another wave of discussion throughout the hall. Knox could see fear on some faces, confusion on others. "I understand your concern," Knox said, raising his voice to be heard over the chatter. "A species that behaves illogically is unpredictable. A species that will sacrifice itself for others is dangerous to normal diplomatic calculations." He paused and looked directly at Admiral Vexcar. "But I want you to consider this. In the 5 years since the Titan incident, humans have been involved in dozens of rescue operations throughout the galaxy. We have saved thousands of lives belonging to dozens of different species. We have never once asked for payment or reward. We have never used these rescues as bargaining chips in negotiations. We simply helped because help was needed." Morthak spoke again, his ancient voice carrying wisdom earned over 3 centuries. "The human species terrifies us," he said bluntly. "Not because they are violent or aggressive. We have dealt with violent species before. Humans terrify us because they are genuinely inexplicably good in ways that we cannot understand or predict." Knox felt a chill run down his spine. He had not expected such a direct statement. "You fear our goodness?" he asked. "We fear what we cannot understand," Morthak replied. "Every species in this galaxy acts according to predictable patterns. Humans do not. When faced with a choice between self-interest and helping others, humans choose to help others so often that it defies all logical explanation." Knox looked around the hall and saw the truth in the faces staring back at him. These aliens were not impressed by human heroism. They were frightened by it. "Thank you for your honesty," Knox said quietly. "I believe this explains much about how other species view humanity." As Knox left the podium, he realized that humans had misunderstood their place in the galaxy. They thought other species feared their weapons or their expansion. Instead, the galaxy feared something much more dangerous. They feared human compassion. Ambassador Lisa Carter sat in her private meeting room aboard Diplomatic Station Omega and looked at the group of alien ambassadors who had requested this secret conference. She had been trying to solve the mystery of the unanimous votes for months, and now these representatives claimed they had answers. The Zephyrian ambassador Kethnal spoke first. He was the son of Admiral Vexcar, who had witnessed the Titan rescue 25 years ago. "Ambassador Carter," Kethnal said, "we have decided to tell you the truth about why our species always vote yes when humans ask for diplomatic exceptions." Lisa leaned forward. "I've been waiting for this explanation for a very long time." The Crystalline Collective's representative, Harmonic 9, chimed in with its musical voice. "The truth is both simple and complex. We vote yes because we have learned to recognize a pattern in human requests." "What kind of pattern?" The Vorthan ambassador, Tel Korvash, answered. He was a descendant of one of the survivors from the deep, thought. "Every time humans ask for a diplomatic exception, it means someone, somewhere, is about to be saved by people who have no logical reason to help them." Lisa stared at the assembled aliens. "What do you mean?" Kethnal activated a holographic display showing diplomatic records. "Look at your request for mining rights in the Kepler Nebula. You told us it was for resource extraction. But our intelligence services discovered the real reason. Your ships detected a faint distress signal from that region. You believed there might be a lost colony ship there." Lisa felt her mouth drop open. "How did you know that?" "We always investigate human requests now," Harmonic 9 said. "We have learned that humans never tell the complete truth about their diplomatic exceptions because you are embarrassed by your own goodness." Tel Korvash brought up another file. "Your request for military escort through Andromedan space. You said it was for routine cargo transport. In reality, you were delivering medical supplies to a planet suffering from a plague outbreak. A planet that other species had decided to quarantine and abandon. And the emergency colonization rights in the neutral zone?" Lisa asked weakly. "Refugee resettlement," Kethnal said. 3 million beings from a failed colony world that the galactic community had written off as acceptable casualties. You wanted to save them, even though it violated 6 different treaties. Lisa sat back in her chair, stunned. You've been spying on us. Not spying, Tel Korvash said gently. Watching, learning, trying to understand why humans behave the way they do. Harmonic Nine's crystalline form shifted colors as it spoke. 25 years ago, your species did something that changed how we view the universe. Captain Hayes and his crew chose certain death to save 43 strangers. This was not an isolated incident. It was a demonstration of something fundamental about human nature. We spent years studying your species after the Titan rescue, Kethnal explained. We analyzed your history, your culture, your individual behavior patterns. What we discovered was both wonderful and terrifying. Terrifying? Lisa asked. Tel Korvash nodded. Ambassador Carter, your species is genuinely good in ways that we cannot comprehend. You help others not because it benefits you, but because it is right. You save lives not because you expect reward, but because those lives have value. You sacrifice your own interests not because you are forced to, but because you choose to. Lisa looked around the table at the alien faces. And that scares you? It makes you unpredictable, Harmonic Nine said. Every other species in the galaxy operates according to logical self-interest. We can predict their behavior, negotiate with them, understand their motivations. Humans are different. You do impossible things for impossible reasons. Kethnal leaned forward. Ambassador Carter, do you know why we really vote yes to your diplomatic requests? Tell me. Because when humans ask for exceptions, miracles tend to happen. And we have learned that human miracles are always worth witnessing. Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes. You're saying you trust us because we're good? We trust you because you have never asked for an exception to serve your own interests, Tel Korvash said. Every request has been about helping others, usually at great cost to yourselves. Harmonic Nine's voice became softer, more musical. The Kepler Nebula mining operation found that lost colony ship, just as you hoped. Your medical supply run to the plague world saved 2 million lives. The refugee resettlement in the neutral zone created a thriving new colony that now contributes to galactic society. We vote yes, Kethnal said, because human diplomatic exceptions always result in someone being saved who would otherwise die, someone who other species, including ourselves, might consider acceptable losses. Lisa wiped her eyes. We never meant to hide our real reasons. We just thought you wouldn't understand. We don't understand, Tel Korvash admitted. That is why your species frightens us. But we have learned to trust what we don't understand, because the results speak for themselves. The meeting continued for another hour, with the alien ambassadors sharing story after story of human actions that had saved lives throughout the galaxy. Rescue missions, medical aid, refugee assistance, disaster relief, all done quietly, without fanfare, simply because help was needed. As the aliens prepared to leave, Kethnal had one final thing to say. Ambassador Carter, your species thinks that your greatest diplomatic asset is your technology or your military strength. You are wrong. Your greatest asset is your heart. Your willingness to help others, even when it makes no logical sense, has earned you something that no other species in galactic history has achieved. What's that? Universal trust. Every species in the galaxy knows that when humans make a promise to help, they will keep that promise even if it kills them. That kind of reliability is beyond price. After the aliens left, Lisa sat alone in her meeting room and thought about what she had learned. She pulled up her communication system and began composing a message to Earth. Earth Command, she typed. I have discovered why the galaxy trusts us. It's not because they fear our weapons or respect our technology. It's because they know that when we say we want to help someone, we really mean it, even if helping means we die trying. She paused and looked out at the stars. We thought they feared our strength. Instead, they're amazed by our hearts. And perhaps that's the most human thing of all, being surprised that kindness could be our greatest weapon. Lisa sent the message and smiled. Tomorrow, she would probably receive another unanimous yes vote on some human diplomatic request. Now she finally understood why.